All right, so we're gonna jump right in. So I'm doing a little bit of clout chasing on this one. And so this particular video is gonna be kind of like a piggyback off of a concept that Professor Jiang had in his video about the theory of everything and the exegesis of love. So we're gonna talk more about that because this was a really, really pivotal concept that I don't know if how much people might have paid attention to it, but that was probably the biggest part of that lecture or that talk that he had. And so we definitely should touch on that. And so I wanted to make a video to kind of go a little bit deeper into detail about exactly what he was referring to when we talk about love. So if you remember in the movie in the video, he talked about the monad operating out of love through vibration. And so here's a definition of, you know, so you can understand what monad means roughly. And so you can say it says most basic or original substance, unity in the ancient Greek. Okay. So is what we would understand as God or, the creator of the universe. Okay. So the monad, as he was talking about, is vibration. And so you have a high vibration, which is more so the spiritual world. And then you get the lower vibration, which descends into the physical or the physical world. So you have the high and then you have the low. And then once you have that physical world and the world we live in, or the universe and the world we live in, um, you now have human beings and the the creator wants to experience newness or imagination as he spoke about in the video. And so that's what free will is about, so that we can create and imagine and give the monad the experience of being on the planet. So you can do free will, and that gives you the option to do good or bad, evil or good, whatever. And the only way you know whether you're doing good or you're doing evil is through love. Now, the thing is that there's a lot of contention on, well, the modern day viewpoint of love can be very different for a lot of different people. Some people believe that lust is love, and it's not. So we're gonna talk about that, and that's the real reason why I wanted to make this video and piggyback and bring out that point that he made in that video, so that we could remove that ambiguity of what people may think love is in a modern day sense versus what he meant in that video. And if I'm wrong, you can definitely tell me to be quiet. I'm not right or whatever. But hopefully he agrees with me. Okay. So the origin of the word love comes from the Middle English lufu, feeling of love, romantic sexual attraction. I don't think that's love. It's not love. That's lust. Okay. So it's reconstructed from the Proto-Germanic lubo, from the Proto-Indo-European root louv or louv, love, to care, desire, love. All right. So that's the etymological breakdown of the word roughly. Okay. So the universe identifies two ways to show love: universal love, that is unconditional. Okay. And so you can either supply energy to somebody or system, or you could preserve energy of a person or system. Okay. And so some examples, real simple, is like, say you're going to the store. You go to the store, you approach the building, you open the door, you see a man, woman, or child behind you, and instead of proceeding on into the store, closing the door, you hold it open for them, right? So what you just did was you sacrificed your energy to preserve the energy of another person. That is an act of love. You could probably rack up video game points if you just went and volunteered somewhere, opening the door for people, saving them energy, so they could just walk right in. Because you can remove stress. Some people might not like touching doors. Um, there might be handicapped people, elderly people, whatever. It's a deed to society. Okay, so you're preserving people's energy. Supplying energy is just as simple as just taking people food. You volunteer for some organization that's feeding the homeless or whatever. You're providing food, taking food, you're supplying energy. That's an act of love. Both of those examples, you do not have to know the people to do it. Okay. I'm going to zoom through this because there's kind of a lot of stuff, and I intended for this to kind of be a short video. Okay. So the monad, now, if you remember, Dr. Jiang, or excuse me, Professor Jiang, uh, said that the monad is centered in love. Its epicenter is in love. Okay. So the monad, if you look out over the universe, is in the friction management business, above, amongst other things, the friction management. Okay, so let's take the engine and we're going to look at the engine. Hopefully, you've driven a car before, or you're at least aware of what engines do in whatever form you've interacted with them. Okay, and so we're going to look at this and we're going to bring this out, all right? Because it's in this that we're going to really actually look at an example of how love works from the universal standpoint. Okay, so you have an engine system. Okay, and so you have these parts that are now, that engine I just showed you is an 800 horsepower engine. Okay, now you have these parts like the cylinder, the piston, connecting rod. Don't ask me what number 4 went. You can ask ChatGPT that. Um, and so you have these parts in the engine that once they have fuel and all the things that they need to operate, they're operating at a really high level of force. Okay, and in order for them to move amongst themselves, amongst each other, without starting a fire, is you have to add a lubricant to the engine. Okay, without that lubricant, that engine, the pistons, all of that friction is going to heat up and eventually catch a fire. Okay, and that's a heat loss. It loses efficiency without that oil. So what you have is oil as a lubricant that allowed these parts of a system to work very closely together to the point to where incidental contact is minimized so that work can continue, the energy can be provided towards work of the cycle of the engine. Okay, without that oil, these parts will not last longer than a few seconds, maybe a minute, not even a minute, seconds. All right, and so that's what we have to understand in a system, is that the parts and the components have a relationship, and that relationship is delicate and based off of the role or the goal of that actual system. Okay, so that comes to bring now love. Now, when I looked it up, it didn't say that this word love has anything to do with this, but in the case of that engine that we just spoke about, that oil or the lubricant is the agent of love in that engine. It is the agent that allows these parts to move amongst each other without fighting, without friction, a loss of heat and efficiency, productivity. Okay, so I don't think that this is really the root of the word lubricant, but it's a funny coincidence. Okay, system dynamics. All right, all right, that's not, all right. So anyway, so let's say we have a system of human beings, all right, and we have 5 employees or 5 people in this co-op. These people own this cycle for this system. And if each person does their part, at the end of the day or the end of the cycle, they'll have one gold bar that they'll sell, and then they'll go home to their family, feed their family, whatever. Okay. So when they run this, cycle, now if you think about this, if these individuals in any way start to have issues with each other, they're going to affect the outcome of the system, right? And so if you can imagine that, let's just say that employee number one bumps into employee number two, and employee number two gets upset, right? And so if employee number two gets upset with employee number one, now you have a conflict, you have friction. All right. Now I do want to bring this point up again, or I want to bring this point up. The universe is friction. It's the result of whatever the principle is that says that objects cannot occupy the same space, which means everything is in friction with something. It's just a matter of whether or not they can work together. Okay. So anyway, if employee one and two starts fighting, now they're going to affect the entire cycle because you have a stoppage in work, because you have a loss of energy or heat from that system because of an argument or a fight. Okay, which means there is no love in that situation. So these 5 people in this co-op have to find a way to lubricate, apply a lubricant to the situation between employee one and employee two. Without it, they will starve. Okay. So in this system, they all have a vested interest in figuring out the agent of love that's going to work between employee one and employee two. Once it's applied, the response would be something like employee two, after being bumped by employee one, says, you know what? I know employee one was not trying to, do it on purpose, or they weren't being malicious. It was incidental contact. I'm just going to brush it off. They don't even have to apologize. I get it. It's a closed space. Things happen. I'm not concerned about it. We all probably have at least been in that situation at some point where we had to work with people in a way, and there was some contact that in a normal situation you wouldn't accept, but because you had some goal that you had together in mind, you didn't worry about it because there's bigger there's bigger priorities. All right. So just like in this situation, right? So let's say we got the same co-op, but now we added a 6th person. All right. And so now you have a system. We just introduced another person or another function that now is going to complicate things, because these original 5 may or may not know this person, but they decided like, hey, if we add a 6th person after reviewing our cycle, if we add this 6th person and their function, we can produce 2 gold bars in that period of time versus just one. Okay. Now, the issue you're going to have is this is a new person. How do they get along? What's the synergy? Because this new person may have to tell some of these employees what to do, when to do it, how to do it, in order for them to achieve that higher output at the end of that cycle. Okay. And so you're going to have to apply some level of love or a lubricant in this system so that all of these people are able to work together with their personalities, with their work ethic and style, and all of these things, so that this system can, go off seamlessly. All right. And so that is in every single system, everything. The entire universe is a system. Your body is a system. The world is a system. Your household is a system. Your job is a system. Your business is a system. The solar system is a system. Earth is a system. Okay. So that is what happens in a system. When you are in a relationship with a person, a romantic relationship, this applies. If you're in a relationship with somebody and every single thing you do, y'all are arguing, you have to apply some agent of love, whether it's a therapist, whether it's just talking to each other, whether it's writing a note. You have to find some way to resolve that conflict. You have to apply a lubricant to that situation. Now, in those examples, their incentive is that gold bar at the end of the day. So they're not doing it altruistically. They're doing it because there's uh, an expected reward at the end. Okay, without it, they probably won't be able to or wouldn't be doing that job at all. So it's funny because if the monad is centered in love, and that's the lubricant that the preservation of energy, etc., etc. Well, in the example we just used, money is the lubricant. All right, because money is the lubricant, the liquidity that allows you to apply it to anybody. It doesn't have to be a special relationship. You can get anybody to do just about anything in today's world for a certain price. So it's a form of artificial love. It's generic. It's a generic type of lubricant. And it's funny because it has that common that common root in the word monad, money. Is that a false god? We hear that a lot. That was in the movie Obey, I think. Money is your god. Okay. So what's the role that evil plays? The role that evil plays, the seven deadly sins. Have you seen that movie Seven? One of my favorites. Okay. These are agents of entropy. Okay. And we'll talk about entropy in a second. I'm trying to roll through this. So if you look at this situation, okay, now you have this system we just talked about. Now, if employee number one, or excuse me, yeah, if employee number one gets pissed off because employee six is telling them what to do, and employee number one is like, hey, don't tell me what to do. I know my job. I'm the best at this, etc., etc. That's pride. It's going to destroy productivity in the system. Okay. That's an agent of entropy. It's going to slowly fall apart until something is done about that relationship between the two, applying a lubricant so that they can work together without a loss of energy, production loss, heat. If one person is envious of the other, that's one of the most toxic traits you can have in a system like this. Envy. Envy can make a person sacrifice themselves just so that somebody else doesn't um, achieve their goal. All right, sloth, laziness. We know that laziness in a system is just not going to work. You won't get the same output. You might get half a bar. You might get something short of the actual goal. Okay, wrath. If employee one bumps into employee two gets upset and say, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to flatten this guy's tires. Now you're going to have a loss of energy or a loss of production because one person can't get to work, get back and forth to work. You're going to have an argument or a fight. There's going to have to be a conference or a way to apply lubricant to this problem. Okay. Lust. If any of these employees are spending much of their time sending nasty texts to each other, you're going to have a loss of productivity. All right. Gluttony. If employee six eats everybody's lunch, they won't have fuel to operate for the rest of the day. You're not getting your 2 gold bars. Greed. If employee one says, you know what, my position is more important than all of y'all's combined, so I deserve 1 gold bar by myself, and y'all can split the other gold bar. Well, that's going to start a fight. Okay, a fight, that's fire, it's friction, an argument. It's a loss of energy that doesn't go into the system for productivity. All right, that's what the role of evil does. And in any situation where you're dealing with human beings, this applies. Now, if we're talking about inanimate objects have wear and tear. So you'll have to apply maintenance to those things. If you have these issues with humans, the maintenance is therapy. The maintenance is a conference. The maintenance is a write up or something similar to that. All right. All right. So now entropy. So basically, evil, or those 7 deadly sins in a system, is what makes a system slowly fall apart over time. So when you first put your system together, it's in the highest level of order, which is called minimum entropy or low entropy. So it's a state of highest order. Over time, without the maintenance of applying, a lubricant to make sure that it don't start any fires so that you have a loss of productivity, um, you're gonna get you're gonna go into chaos. And so you have to apply energy in the form of some type of maintenance or lubricate the situations so that you don't get a fire. All right. And so it says thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder. Okay, let's go forward. All right, so evil, service to self. So basically, it's just being self-centered, doing things that are more so to appease your own wants, needs, desires, etc. Okay, so it's just using other people for your own gains without regards to their well-being. Okay, that's service to self. And you have service to others. Service to others is opening the door for somebody. It's giving food to somebody. It's being aware of another person's situation, and in one way or the other, lightening the load or helping them in their journey. That requires compassion of the heart. And that's why it's connected to love. It's not love in the sense of like, hey, that person's attractive. I want to, do nasty things with the person. That's not love, that's lust. Love requires first understanding the person's situation and then becoming a part of it to help them achieve that goal. So I put JC on here, and that's Jesus Christ. And so this is just something that I've been thinking about. And it says that Jesus died for our sins or whatever. And so it's interesting because that's a sacrifice. When you open the door for somebody, you're sacrificing your energy for another person. Jesus Christ, the figure that we know of, it says that they sacrificed for us. So it makes me wonder, what exactly did they do? They preserved something in us, or did they provide something for us? Something that gives us, helps us towards our goal. What is our goal? I don't know, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so we're in modern day systems, and so if you understand, is that everything we do is a cycle. Okay, in a system, it cycles, and so sometimes humanity is in high order. There's a lot of love. We work well together, just like Babylon trying to build the highest building, etc. And we're just really in sync with each other. More love than there is anything else. and it slowly falls apart, and the entropy seeps in. Okay, so if you look at the period of time from the Younger Dryas to right now, the Younger Dryas is that period of about 12,000 so years ago. There was a cataclysm. Well, now what does a cataclysm do? A major cataclysm do to the inhabitants of a planet? Well, it destroys life and life forms. And those life forms are also food for other life forms. So now you have scarcity. What does scarcity do? It makes people greedy and they hoard. Eventually, you hoard so much of the most important things, it becomes capital, which is what Professor Jiang talked about. So, salt. I have this fascination with salt. Okay. And so I'm reading about these stories of how salt saved so many different civilizations and people, and where they, just the role that salt played in the words that we use today that, you know, uh, are have its roots in the word or the salt. Like I think it said in Europe or London, whatever, every single city with the last with which WICH at the end of it was a place where salt was produced. It's really funny. So anyway, moving on. So we are in the Kali Yuga, which is basically the highest level of disorder of a planet or human beings. It's the fourth phase in the Hindu religion. Okay, and so we live in a service to self society. We're all out for ourselves. Okay, the Industrial Revolution started by the biggest service to self operation in modern history through slavery. You had individuals that went over to Africa and took whole energy units by the thousands, transported them to another uh, body of land, and built so much wealth that led to the Industrial Revolution, the cotton gin, and mass production of things. Okay, we live in the epicenter of the most chaotic form of lifestyle within the last 26,000 years. Okay, and so when you look at um, systems like communism, socialism, well, communism and socialism are actually forms of government that are attempting to emulate a service to other society. Okay, because the people in the I theoretically you don't have to worry about shelter, worry about food, you don't have to worry about health care, whatever. So all of the things that you need for life are provided. Okay, and so it's encouraged that these people work together for the good of that society. But nobody owns anything. You don't have this individualism. Okay, this was a natural concept if you go back far enough to civilizations that were actually considered God civilizations, run by individuals or leaders who seem to be elected by God to run them, and those citizens, the followers there. Communism and socialism are attempts to create a God-like society in the middle of a very selfish phase of humanity. And that's why they don't really work. You can't force adults to work like this, especially if they smell freedom somewhere. You're not going to be able to do it. You're in a communist environment, but then you find out that people are able to do these things in another place. You're like, hey, this is the reason why Kim Jong Un absolutely shuts down North Korea, because he don't want the infection of the free will and evil that comes from, the Western societies being able to say anything, buy anything, do anything. That's why they're so remote, because they don't want the the entropy of the chaos that comes from people having these whims of decision. Okay. Is there a solution? Yes. But you might not like it. Well, you may already know, you might be ready for it. But Yes, there's a solution. That's what we have eschatology for. You have end times, all right? And so in end times, what you have, okay, so first, let me run through this real quick. If you look at any of the wealthy people at the beginning of the period, the beginning stages of the West in the Industrial Revolution, you have individuals who were born, they saw an opportunity, they were really ambitious, and they were in the right place at the right time with the right ideas, and they created the Mars Company. They created Domino's. They created Standard Oil. They created all of these things that are the base of the society we live in now. Okay. And so that individual is the pioneer. All right. And so within that individual, say Rockefeller or William Randolph Hearst, uh, that person is the pioneer. So their trials and tribulations is a treasure trove of wealth, as far as not just capital and money, but information, knowledge, wisdom within their realm of operation. They are the guru of their um of their industry, the magnate. They're the tycoon. No one knows more about those things than that person. All right. And so what happens over time is that person's gonna have children. All right. And what they're gonna do is not only are they gonna pass along money, capital, but they're gonna pass on information. They're gonna pass on wisdom. They're gonna pass on knowledge so that that child is able to be raised with the same principles that is sustaining that massive business that their father or parents created. Okay. And so you can't, that magnate can't just go to another adult and make that adult capable of running their business, because that adult already has their own base, personality, understanding, etc. They're not cultivated for it. Okay. But you can do that with your children. So that's what that magnate or that person, that pioneer is going to do. And their children are going to be able to um, you know, sustain. All right. And so that's exactly the same thing. And that's the reason for, let me not say it's the reason for, but I will say that that is a byproduct of being alive during a event, eschatology, an end time event or series of events. It's going to affect every single human on the planet, and every single human is going to have their character tested. It's within that test that the person finds out who they are, and they find out whether they are full of virtue or full of shit. Okay. And so what's going to happen is that as you traverse through these events and you go through trials and tribulations, you're going to have the false parts of you torn away. And once those things are torn away, whoever is around you, if they see what you are and they like it, they are going to do any and everything that they can do to keep you alive in that situation, because they know that whatever it is about you, it works for them and how they see the world, their worldview in whatever situation. So that person or whoever it is going to be that pioneer. Just like those magnates, they have people that believe in their company and they're going to work with them to fulfill whatever the vision is. Okay. That is a byproduct of being alive during an end time period, is that you're going to find out who you are and you are going to be able to cultivate who you are. Okay. Everybody on the planet dies. There's no escaping it. Okay. So the fact is that what do you learn while you're here? What do you pay attention to? What are you conscious of? So yes, there is a solution. But, you know, but for the people who may be watching this and watches and is into history and understanding, or, curious about history and things that have happened on this planet, you're kind of ahead of the game, because it's an emotional thing. You don't really have to have a lot of material things. A lot of people in survival will tell you that, survival is really mostly about attitude, um, more so than anything else. You have to have the attitude and will to want to survive. Because otherwise, when you see things being too hard, you could just give up. So it's really about preparation mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if that's your thing. Okay. And so just showing this again is that at some point in history, mankind worked very much together. All right. This is order. There was a lot of love. You see how closely they are together. All right. And they're not fighting, they're in order. But then over time, we just fall apart. It happens. Nothing stays the same. We live in cycles. Everything is a cycle, everything is a system. Okay. There probably was another point I had this back here for, but uh, I don't remember it. So, all right. So, I'm not sure if you might have seen this movie, Leave the World Behind, but this is the point that I'm making about end times, right? Now, if you've seen this movie, and if you haven't, I would suggest going to see it. But basically, these are the scenes that happen in the movie right after this large booming sound happened the second time. Okay. And the first time they were just completely um, thrown off. They was like, "What is that? What's going on?" By the second time, so many things had happened the second time that they're like, "You know what? We're in a situation that is really shitty." At first, the first time we didn't really know what was going on, so we were just kind of like, "Yo, what's going on?" After it happened the second time, this is when it really sunk in that, the world was pretty much going to shit. So anyway, the point that I'm making here is that, see, both right after that sound, it cut to this scene where, see, before, when they first got to this house, everybody was sleeping in their own room. Well, the mom and dad were sleeping in the same bed. But after this traumatic event, what have they done? They're now back together in a smaller space where, if you would have done it maybe even a week before, you couldn't have paid them to sleep in the same bed like this. This is what happens when we're in a society where we don't really see any problems or threats or whatever in our environment. Okay, same here. This was right after that same thing. His daughter, this is this guy's daughter in the movie, and right after that loud sound, he was sleeping on the floor at first. Okay, and she had the bed. After that sound, she was like, "Dad, can you sleep in the bed with me tonight?" He was like, "Sure," because now they have worry and they have fear, and so now they are dependent on each other, and, and so it is a hard time, or trials, that are now bringing people back together in ways that they would not. That's a byproduct of eschatology, or end time events. Okay, it's a resetting of human beings, and that's what this is showing: is that we come together when there's a common threat, when everything is flourishing. I put this in my other video about the handbag carvings or whatever, that, we have the choice of immortality or reproduction. And so in end times, or in crazy situations where things are dangerous, in order to survive, reproducing is not the best method. The best method is to trying to find a way to become immortal. Okay. And also, what I wanted to bring up in this point too, in this movie, is that they all left at some point to try to find somebody who had more information. Okay. And so the point that I was, the reason why I was bringing that up is because it's in these times where people are going to have their character stripped away. And so once this, let's say that this movie kept going and there was more events that happened or stuff like this, all of these people are going to look for answers in a way to survive. They're going to be looking for, people, individuals, information, knowledge, wisdom about how to survive this. Okay. And that is the beginning of a new society being born, is by the restructuring of humans' ideals and the way that they relate to each other. Because, we've been in a selfish position for the past 3 to 4 thousand years, really bad. Because that's really like when the Mayan calendar started, and it's also about the same time that the Kali Yuga started, 3,000-ish years ago. All right, so I'm done with that one. What we got next? I think this is the end. So basically, so the monad, or the creator, having created all things, even down to physical objects, we have the strong nuclear force, or the strong nuclear interaction. This is the force that holds atoms together, but it's also the ones that it's the force that's manipulated to release nuclear energy. The monad that created all things created this force that forces protons to get along with each other in every single atom that exists. If those protons had a choice or free will, we'd be fucked. Okay. So I just want you to understand that as a human being, we are in a very unique position, especially during the period of time that we live in today, where our decisions are going to dictate our future. Well, when is that not true? But usually it's not life and death, should I say. Okay. But luckily, these things don't have choices. All right. And so that's a form of love, regardless of how forceful it is. It's a form of love. And so this is basically what I wanted to bring out and talk about. That was based off of Professor Jones' uh, theory of everything video that talked about love. Is that that's the test right now? Is your ability to, I don't know, maybe it's compassion. I don't know, but this is where you get to find out who you are. And so while we have these periods of time right now where it's relative calm, um, this is a good period of time to actually kind of think about, all right, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? What are my values? What virtues do I want to work on? What are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? Okay. Think about whether you know, your head's in the clouds, or whether you pay attention to who you are, how you treat people, the people around you, things like that. I mean, this is a time of reflection. This is the period we live in. And so this is really what I wanted to bring out, in talking about love, as Professor Jones talked about in his video, because I wanted to remove that ambiguity. And I just feel like that part of his video, I really feel like was the most critical information, because it is the it is based off of just your decision. You don't have to have money for it. You don't have to have anything. It's a decision you can make as to whether you want to do one thing or the other. And understanding the implications of it is really what I wanted to bring out and at least touch on a bit. Now, if it's not clear, I can go further into depth, but I just didn't want to do a very long video. This is still longer than I wanted it to be. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's helpful. And I gotta go. Take care.